Thank you to these sponsors of the Before I Die New Mexico Virtual Festival in 2020. A Good Goodbye, Gail Rubin puts the fun in funeral planning. After, a new way to stay connected with your loved ones in the cemetery anytime and anywhere. Aquamationinfo.com, where you can learn about alkaline hydrolysis, an eco-friendly alternative to flame cremation. Compassion and Choices, offering care and choice at the end of life. Daniel's Family Funerals and Cremations and Gabaldon Mortuary in Albuquerque. Fairview Memorial Park and Vista Verde Memorial Park in Albuquerque and Rio Rancho. Avista Cremation and Burial in Santa Fe. DeVargas Funeral Home and Crematory in Espanola and in Taos. Estate Pros, which offers personal dispersal of possessions due to a move, illness, or death. French Funerals and Cremations and Sunset Memorial Park in Albuquerque. And Keeper, which helps you keep memories alive with online tributes to preserve, celebrate, and share life legacies.
Death is full of surprises, huh?
You have no idea.
Yes, that's me, Gail Rubin, the doyen of death, welcoming you to this session of our 2020 Before I Die New Mexico virtual festival. Because of the pandemic, which is getting worse every day this week, it looks like, we are meeting online. Let's get down to business. I am so excited to have Kyle Tevlin with us. She started a company called I Want a Fun Funeral. And in fact, you were featured, I think, on, was it the CBS Sunday morning show?
It was NBC.
NBC. Okay. The Sunday Today show.
Yes. One of those. It wasn't the most popular one, but it was the second most popular one.
Well, Kyle is so funny and a lot of fun, and she's got great ideas about how we can make funerals meaningful and memorable and fun. And she is going to talk to us today about taking our funeral traditions up a notch. So with that, let me toss it to you, Kyle.
Okay, well, hello, everybody. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for that, Gail. I was so excited that you were having that nice film intro, because usually I do something which wasn't really going to work that great today. So you did the perfect intro, because it ended with the guy coming out to the standing ovation, which I love. And that's always the analogy that I use for what we should be getting when we die, is we should be getting a standing ovation. And that's the analogy that I use in my head. And I think the easiest way to describe what it is that I'm talking about is that our goodbyes should be really big. Like, if we don't deserve a standing ovation when we leave, we never have, like that. It's just, that's the appropriate thing. So I would like to offer you this whole new way of looking at funerals, kind of based on that thought. And I'm going to start off by showing you a cartoon. It's a cave family inside of a cave. And the father on this side has drawn like a typical stick deer, and he is saying, and his son has drawn this beautiful deer.
Yeah.
And the father is saying, no, Og, no, that's not the way we've always done it. And to me, this is my analogy for funerals. We have this picture of what we think is great, and we have no idea that there is something so much better and more elegant and beautiful. We've just never seen it. We don't even know it exists. So that's what I'm going to talk about. So I would like you to start off kind of pretending a little bit that you don't already know what our funeral tradition is. like, this is the first time in the history of the world anybody's ever died, and everybody's sitting around going like, well, now what do we do? Like, should we do something? Like, go with that kind of a mind. Nothing's ever been done. So I'm gonna use this whole like my time tonight, really. It's a little bit more night out here on the East Coast. Use this story as an example of what it is I'm talking about. So this is the story. It's about a young man. It's a true story. A young man named Aaron Collins. He lived in Kentucky. He died when he was 30 years old. This was in 2012. So this is all true. And somebody sent me this story. So this guy had died young, and he had written down some last wishes. And he just wrote this on a piece of paper. He said, I want to make sure, he was kind of writing it to his siblings. I want to make sure that mom and dad are paid back any money that I still owe them, because he had not achieved like a lot of material success. And then I want you to leave a really big tip. And I'm not talking 25%. I'm talking an effing $500 for a pizza to a pizza place. And his brother said that this was the kind of guy he was. He liked to do those kinds of things. In fact, one time his family had been with him when they had been waited on by a waitress who was new, and she did a really bad job. And she kept apologizing, and he felt bad for her. So he left her a $50 tip. And just wrote on the ticket, you know, like, good luck, you know, you'll get better, don't worry about it. So he was that kind of a guy. So he asked his family to go leave this $500 tip for a pizza. So the family did not have the $500 to do that. They asked people, their friends, they got the money. They went down to their local pizza place, just had pizza, sodas, and gave their waitress $500 in cash as her tip. And of course, told her why they were doing this. The story of their brother who had died young, and their son, it was the mom and the brothers and sisters, and that he had made this last wish. So they were doing it in her honor, in his honor. So of course the waitress was thrilled, and they were smart enough to videotape it, and they wanted to tape it and put it up on YouTube, because some of the people who had contributed the money did not live locally, and they wanted to be able to share with them how the event had gone. So they put it up on YouTube, and it started getting some hits, and some media picked it up, and it was going around. And by the time I found it, which was maybe 2 months later, they had $60,000 that people had sent them just because they were inspired. They had heard about it, and they just wanted to contribute to this great cause in this stranger's honor, like they didn't know him, this Aaron Collins. So I heard this, and so this was what, 8 years ago. I can honestly say that changed my life. When I heard this story, all I could think of was, oh my God, why aren't we doing this every time someone dies? Like, that's all I could think. Like, what a switch. Like, when somebody dies, the first thing that we think of is like, what are we going to do to honor them? What are we going to do? Like, roll up our sleeves. What are we going to do to honor them? It just seems like nothing made more sense than like to add that nice aspect to a death. Like, what are we going to do? Right then and there, I started having like a new picture of funerals. Oh, and then just to finish the story, I always get halfway through that story and then forget about the best part of it. So the brother has $60,000. And he decides at some point to take a tour across the country. And every night he stopped in a different town and gave a waiter or waitress $500 as her tip, as their tip. And told the story again about his brother, Aaron. He's done it over 100 times now. All the videos are up on YouTube, and there's a website, aaroncollins.org. And if you go to YouTube and go to Aaron Collins, you can see all the videos of them giving the $500 tips. And so just thinking about how he got to do that, like I had another lightning bolt, thinking about the transformation for this family from something that was all sadness and tragedy, like your 30-year-old brother or son dies, like that's something that you would carry with you the whole rest of your life with a heavy heart and sadness, maybe the worst thing that ever happened to you. And now they got to talk about that, that loss with joy, and they got to talk about it and smile. And all those times that he got to give those tips, he made his brother into a superhero and bringing all that joy. And this just, I don't know, I don't think it's too idealistic. It just seems like to take something that's all loss and associate it with something that's positive, something that makes you literally smile and makes you happy. Like, why would you not want to do that when you had a loss? Like, it just felt like a no-brainer to me. I haven't lost anybody in my circle at all in those 8 years, which I'm very happy about. But believe me, if I do, I'm going to be doing something like that. In fact, when I was thinking about that, I thought about my dad who had died a few years before, and he was my favorite person. There was nothing I wouldn't have done for him. And he got a really not a great send-off for various reasons. And the guy is still going to get a party at some point. But I got very defensive thinking like, well, I would have done that for my dad if I had just thought about it. Like, I just felt embarrassed now that I hadn't done something really great for my dad, because I would have if I thought about it. And that's kind of part of the problem with this whole thing is our funeral rituals feel to most people like they're set in stone, right? Most people think like, well, this is what you have to do. And they think that you have to go through these certain ceremonies. And a lot of people actually think that there's like laws that like things have to be done a certain way, you know, not to get too off topic, but like you have to be embalmed, which is totally not true. Like things like that. There's so much more freedom and flexibility than people realize. So thinking like completely different isn't on anybody's radar really, but that's my job, is to try to get people to think bigger and take it up a notch. So that was just really mesmerizing to me, to think about something that was just added so much to the survivors in terms of healing, that forever they would be able to think about that loss and smile, and how just healing that is. And then kind of a byproduct of all that, and this isn't the essence of this talk tonight, but I got the right audience for this, and I feel like I always need to spread the message, that this all only happened because Aaron Collins wrote this down ahead of time. That's why it happened. And he wasn't thinking big. He just said, go do it once. Like, it was really no big deal. Just one night, go down and give a $500 tip. His family was only going to do it once. Like, nobody was thinking big here. So they just went down. And it was through sharing it and people seeing and hearing that it took on a life of its own and became this like phenomenon. It just feels like kind of miraculous, because it never started out being such a grand event. So I always feel like, well, that's all the more reason, like, just to do something little, because you don't know where it's going to take you. All it took was because he wrote it down. So I know Gail certainly is on that, and I don't know all the people on here, but hopefully we're all of the mind that planning ahead is always the way to go. Because people love to carry out a wish that somebody has left them. Like they're his family, Aaron Collins' family. They were so pleased to be able to go do this for him. And then look what came of it, you know? So that is what I always think of as like the quintessential example of what's possible. When somebody has died, things are possible that aren't possible at any other time. people will do things then that they wouldn't do ordinarily because of the emotions, the depth of the feelings, the gravity of the situation. Like what's as bad as death? Like, just to be, dramatic about it, but seriously, not death is the worst. That makes it a unique time. Like, it is unique, and the emotions and the just the energy of the stress, the grief, all of it is huge. People will do things, and so my thinking is, why don't we put all that energy into something good instead of just trying to manage it? Like, channel it into an activity, a project, an event, like something. And that's what we're going to talk about here. It just feels like the perfect time to do something like that. You think about time, when somebody's died, people will say, I'd give my right arm to have them back. Or, sometimes, especially if it's a young person has died, people say, I wish it were me instead of them. Like, they feel like I would do anything to have them back. Okay, so here we go. Let's do something. Like, then don't just sit in a funeral home for 2 hours and think that's all you need to do. Like, yeah, let's do something. Because we have this model right now that, to me, isn't really serving us. It's just there. It's not terrible. The problem that I see with it is that it's very passive. We're just watching other people carry out a ceremony, rituals. And my whole thing is like, let's be engaged creators of how we say goodbye to somebody, not just passive observers. Funerals are a funny thing. I feel like they have this weird, like, life of their own or death of their own. That, you go through the motions of this, you go to the funeral home, you do this, you sit in a funeral home, and they're not all like this, but I'm going to completely stereotype and generalize for the sake of my points. They can be a little stuffy, like this old Victorian look with heavy drapes, and there's not a window or sunlight to be found. There's just not a lot of life in funeral homes. They're just, I don't know, they're deadening to me. No pun intended. That's just always the way I felt about them. And people, you go there and you sit in a folding chair for 2 hours. Maybe there's a service for a half an hour or an hour. You go to the graveside for a little while, and then you go have a meal. You always have a meal. And then you call it a day. Like, okay, that's it. It's like, really? Like, that's the best we can do? Like, it just seems so lame when I think about actually really honoring somebody by doing something. Like, really? We're just going to sit there and watch somebody else do something? And now, even with, it is somewhat, well, the COVID is a temporary thing where people, really can't do much at all. But even without COVID, just with cremation on the rise now, so many people, honestly, they don't do anything. Like, they have no service. That is not uncommon. Or they'll, the family will go out to dinner or something. Like, they'll market in a very small way, but I feel like our what we're doing just seems to get less and less a little bit. And just to, I'm going to elaborate on this as we go on, but what I'm talking about tonight isn't just like life celebration. Like, okay, in a way, everybody's calling them a life celebration now for the most part, which is great. Like, it's a good step in the right direction. But I feel like to a lot of people, a life celebration means like, oh, we had a video with pictures. Like that was a really big deal. Or we we put out, all their different, fishing hats, and I'm not putting those things down. I'm just thinking like, they're great. They were a great first step, but that isn't what I'm talking about in this. I'm talking about like literally like roll up your sleeves and do something like with Aaron Collins, like get in action. So I need to describe a little bit about how that happens. But my vision, like just to keep, I feel like my vision is what's driving this. So I hope that that this is coming across, is this part of my vision for this honoring of people in a new way, is that when somebody dies, like right after you say, I'm sorry, or whatever, like one of the very next questions would be, because it's a whole new world now, is, and what did you do to honor them? Like, I hope you can picture this as easily as I can. Like in a world where that was the new norm, that when somebody died, like one of the next questions was, and what did you do to honor them? Like the flip side, like here's the good part. What did you do to honor them? So that we're always left with something positive. And I'm not Jewish, but I've heard, and okay, good. You can help me out, Gail, if I get anything wrong here. When kids do their bar and bat mitzvah, they have to do a mitzvah?
Ideally, yeah.
Ideally, okay. Which is basically like a good deed, isn't it?
Deed, a project, yeah.
That's it. Like at one point I thought, I'm just doing like a bar mitzvah for the dead, I think. Which is okay. But like, that is what I'm thinking. Like you've done something, and that is just like the new norm. So that now death isn't just loss. And I feel like in our culture, which is so death phobic and has so much anxiety and like just, I feel like we have a hatred of death. It's this weird thing, like we just cannot accept it. And yes, things are getting better. And obviously we're all at a Before I Die festival. So I am preaching to the choir here, but we all also know out in the general public, it is not a topic anybody wants to talk about. So my vision obviously is not going to happen overnight, but just think about it in a world in whatever decades, whenever, like if this became the norm, where every time somebody died, the next question was, and what did you do to honor them? Because that's how normal it became. Because we just realized, don't say goodbye to somebody without doing something good in their honor. Because it's a win-win, it's just, there's no downside to it. So I'll let that sink in for a second. Does anybody want to say anything or ask anything?
So what you're suggesting perhaps is that when somebody dies, maybe we should do a get together with our loved ones to plan what are we going to do now to honor.
Yes, it's very much about bringing people together, because that's a big part of it. And I'm going to talk more about that, but that is exactly it. Because when people come together to do that, it's so bonding for them. And that's what you want at that time. I mean, it's the healing and it's the bonding. Like you've brought people together in a way at an emotional time. So the bonding is really meaningful. You're not just separate people observing something. You've actually shared an experience that then stays with you.
We just had a really great session with Mandy Ben-Walid with Keeper, and she talked about how they did a online memorial service for her grandmother who died of COVID earlier this year, and getting people together to contribute photographs and to contribute readings and memories. In fact, somebody's just asking you, can you give some practical examples you suggest of creating different types of fun in this funeral planning? Now, you know, you offered this great example of this guy and the $500 tips that have continued on. Other ideas, especially when you think about the cremation rate in this country is creeping up into the 70% range. So
Mhm.
a lot more people are getting cremated than buried.
Yeah, and I do have a lot of examples. I think I'll split them up. I was gonna do them at the end, but you know what? I'll do some of them ones now. And I'll tell you right off now, this was not one, this was a personal one I did with my family. It was not something we did at the time because, well, this was for my dad and he died in 2009. And like I said, we didn't do much for him. Sorry, Dad. But now that I've been inspired by myself to want to do something, I had, what's that?
It's not too late.
It's not too late, which is going to be one of my points is there's no time limit on this. So what I did on the last year was the 10th anniversary of his death. So I thought, okay, we'll do something now because I want to mark that anniversary. So this is just a small example, but I felt like this is something that could have happened at the time of his death also. Because it has to be personal, right? We're going to talk a little bit more about that, but it's got to be personal. So the thing with my dad was he loved books. That was his thing, was reading and books. And one of the jokes in our family growing up was that he always said, that's because you don't read enough. And this is what he said, like, if you fell off your bike and skinned your knee, that's because you don't read enough. You know, if you didn't sleep well, that's because you don't read. And like, it was a joke. And he always said it with a smile, but like, that's something that our family knows and always laughs about, and his love for books. So what we did was we got the whole family. I think there was like 17 or 19 of us, you know, between kids and in-laws and grandchildren. And we picked names out of a hat. And you bought a book for that person whose name you picked out of a hat. And since we were all spread out along the East Coast, we couldn't even get together. But what we did on the day of the 10th anniversary, everybody either took a picture of themselves, like holding up their book, or did a little video showing the book they got and maybe the inscription that was in it, and just said, oh, I got this book from Tom and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, some of them had something to do with my dad. Most of them did not, because the point wasn't like that the book had to be about him. It was just, he was inspiring it. But it was so fun. And everybody remembers it. Like, nobody will ever forget that we did that. Mm-hmm. And granted, it was just a text chain on a day, but it made that day really special. And it was really, really fun. So that is like a small example of something you can do, because the whole point of this is that the person's personality is in it and that it means something to the people.
Well, and I've got an example that I could share. I did a project called My 30 Funerals in 30 Days, and I did it 3 years in a row. And I would go to the funerals of people I didn't know, but I also went to a few funerals of people that I did know. And a woman who was in my writer's critique group died, and she had published a children's book, and she had boxes of this book in her garage. So at her funeral, they gave away copies of her book. And you can do this if you have an extensive library. Your loved ones can basically offer up your library to all the attendees at your funeral or memorial service. Oh yeah. And I've been to other events where that happened. And great way to downsize easily, and everybody gets a piece of this person that they know and love.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yes, and just, you know, some of the other ideas that I had for my dad, just to to offer, like, well, that was just one thing I did. And just on the idea of books was, if we had all been together or decided, you know, a smaller subset of people who were together, go in person and donate, make a book donation of new books, perhaps, to an underprivileged school that needs to build their library, or make a cash donation, you know, to maybe a school in Africa where they could buy their own books. Like that. And that was
Pay
just,
for shipping.
well, no. Well, you know, there's so many organizations where you just pay the organization here, and then they go do it on their end. So you don't have to ship stuff like that. So that was just one personal example. Oh, well, this is a request. I mean, this is somebody who was in one of my workshops for planning your own funeral. And she does not want anything big done for her. I mean, there's really a lot of people who don't like big, fancy, like, wasn't there somebody in one of your movies was just saying, don't do anything?
Yeah.
Was it Edward Asner?
Put me
There's
out.
a lot of people.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who feel like that. And so she doesn't want a big thing done. But what she wants is for people to go to a cat shelter and just play with the cats all day. Because she loves cats. We all know these people who love cats. Cats are her life. So that's her request. And that, to me, totally fulfills like the Aaron Collins look, because it's a good deed. It's people coming together. Like, if her friends did that, if we went and did that, we'd have that shared time together. We'd probably spend it talking about her. We would do that good deed. And who knows, maybe we would decide to just go do it every year, or somebody else heard about it and then decide that they would go do that also. You know, so that was, again, that was a small idea, but there's some potential to it. Or just to build on that, that's all she said, go play with the cats. But we could take it up a little bit and say, all right, well, as long as we're going to go to the cat shelter, let's raise some money for them also. Or raise supplies. Like, I've heard sometimes these shelters, like, they need blankets or things, or maybe that's dog shelters, I don't know. But, you know, they use supplies. Do something bigger with it. Like, make it an event. They're not, I mean, all my stories, they're not all with good deeds. They don't necessarily have to be good deeds. I really like the good deeds, but it's really just as much something that was good for the family and memorable. And this woman who I spoke to on the phone, and she's got some death-related business, which I can't remember what it is now, but her young daughter, I think she was a teenager, had died of cancer. It was very sad. And she said that all during her daughter's treatment, she was, you know, building her up. And then the daughter would sort of complain, like, oh, I have to get chemo and I have to go through this. And she said that I was always saying to her, no, you get to have chemo. You live in a world where there's medicine. Some people don't even have that. You get to have a chance. You get to do this. So that was her mindset. And then unfortunately her daughter died. And she said, as she was thinking about the funeral, and she always wanted to be an upbeat person. And in that moment, she's like, I can't think of anything good about this. Like, what, like, there's no good in this thing. And then all of a sudden she just remembered what she always said to her daughter, that you get this, like, you don't have to do this. You get this. And she goes, no, I don't have to go bury my daughter. I get to go bury my daughter. See, that always gets me choked up, because she just realized, like, I can look at this as an honor, because this is a privilege to say goodbye to somebody. And she did not have like a solemn funeral. Her daughter's name was Jenna. And so she had this big, huge party, and she called it a Jennabration. And it was just like, it was literally a huge party, and it was just balloons, like the whole 9 yards. Because her thing was, we are celebrating her life. Like, yes, got cut too short, but I am not going to live with sadness. I'm going to be grateful for the time we had. So yeah, there wasn't a, like, they weren't raising money for anything, but they've got that wonderful memory of how they did something good.
Mhm.
So that's one. This is another one somebody told me, and she had this idea. She was in my planning your funeral in advance class, but she had already been thinking of this. She was an ICU nurse. And she said, that they're a very tight-knit group because obviously it was a very stressful job and they needed to laugh, and they were very close. And she had decided when she died that she wanted to have a big party. She wanted to have a grab bag and everybody would get favors and door prizes. And she wanted to have these T-shirts made of, like the EKG sign, that little EKG symbol of like the scratchy lines going up and down, where like they would go up and down, and then the next one was less, and the next one was flat, and it just said going, going, gone. And she goes, I know that sounds sick, but that's ER humor. Like, we'll all get that. And she was so excited about that. And I just thought, that's totally fun. And it's totally her. Like, people would remember that. It's something that would make them smile. And it was very personal. So I feel like I need more of my, a party. This one was good. Somebody who was a volunteer, like once a month or once a quarter or something at a homeless shelter. And it was a big part of their lives doing this volunteer work. And he said that he wanted to, instead of having a funeral for himself, or in addition to it, whatever, he wanted his people to throw a party for the homeless. Like, go to the shelter that he volunteered at and throw them a party. Because he said they never get a party. Like, they're so on the outs of normal life. He wanted to give back and have a party for them. I thought that was great.
How did that turn out?
Well, I don't know. This was one of those ones where he's like, he wrote that down. That's what he wants his people to do. As far as I know, he's alive and well.
Oh, okay.
But see, this is where, you're planning in advance. Like, you can write your own ideas down. You can do these for somebody if they've written something down or not. But gosh, if you have any ideas of your own, write them down, leave them for your family. Like, that's what Aaron Collins did. Just do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So those are some examples. What I would like to do is go through and like sort of outline kind of how to do this. This might help flesh it out a little bit too, like the process, like, all right, so how would this work? Because, like I said, this isn't normal.
Is the PDF download in the chat? Does this have some of your?
Yes. Yeah. If anybody's like taking notes, which I would not assume anybody's taking notes, but this next part with all these steps are in the PDF. So I've tried to make it so that people, have this to refer to. All right. So first, I want to give the reassurance that, as I was also just kind of saying, it's not like you have to start a foundation. You don't have to quit your job and go on tour every night, going to pizza places. Like, that evolved, like that was a thing, but that is not required. That's not necessary. It does not have to be noble or humanitarian. It just has to be personal and something that means something to you. If you feel called to do a good deed, please do it. If you feel like that's just not coming to you, you're not inspired for that, and you just want to do something personal that's bonding, like an event, like, just go do that. It could be raising money, raising consciousness, doing volunteer work, doing something for charity, starting a legacy, donating your time, just having fun. Like, just bring your family together for like an event. Another example of a friend of mine, no, I'm confusing this thing. Somebody who I didn't know, she has already done this. I thought this was like crazy great. She took out a small life insurance policy, like in addition to her real life insurance policy, she took out an additional small one for the purpose of when she dies, that money is to be used for like 2 or 3 of her friends to go take a trip around the world and spread her ashes in like her favorite places. Like she's already done that. The insurance policy exists. And she was so funny. She's like, I haven't even decided who those people are yet. Because I don't want anybody knowing, ahead of time and then like ingratiating themselves with me. And I just thought that is really forward thinking and creative. And, it's not helping the world, but what a great experience for her 2 or 3 friends that she wanted to share that. And the similar one, that I was thinking of was a friend of mine wanted to do something like that. She wanted all her friends to go to Sedona because that's her favorite place and celebrate her there and scatter her ashes there. It all kind of starts with brainstorming. So that's where the first thing here is to give your goodbye an objective. And like I said, it doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't have to be raising money, but give it some structure. Make it a desired goal. And whether that goal is raise money or just have fun, like make it specific, because this is the whole thing. Like you want it to be something kind of defined so you can answer the question, what did you do to honor that person? Well, we did this particular thing. And I feel like I just got this thought of like, okay, we usually outsource all this. Like, this is what we do when somebody dies. We outsource it all, which wasn't my word. I wish I had come up with that word. But I remember the first time I heard that word was when Caitlin Doty used it. I thought, God, that is so great, because that is so what we do. We outsource the most personal and emotional thing that happens in our life. We outsource it to strangers. Like, why are we doing that? So we, they're the undertakers. And I'm like, you know what? No, this is what my vision is. Like, we're doing the undertaking. Like, we're going to undertake a project.
Well, right. So I've just opened up your PDF and you've got brainstorm and objective. What am I going to do? And why is it important? Make your person's personality shine.
Right. So you want to give it an objective, give it structure. And the other reason for having this structure is that it also becomes like a grounding for you at a terrible time. Like, that's not, I mean, it's still death, it's still loss, it's sadness. And just to say, none of this am I implying means like, oh, to take away sadness. Like, we can't, it's not possible. This is just to make it a little easier, add something that's better to the picture. So having like a focus is a way to ground yourself at a time when there's a lot of stress and pain and anxiety and all that, not good stuff. And you want it to be specific and have an objective, because then that is what becomes your memory. It's like, yes, we did this particular thing. Like, it just makes it an easier, like, just memory event in your head. It makes it easier to bring people together, because you want it to be a group event that people participate in and have a part of. So if it has like an objective, then it's easier for people to grasp and like, oh yeah, I can help with that. Yes, I know how to do this. Like, I think about one, this isn't a big like event, but it's just an example of ways, an easy way to personalize a goodbye that I always think of. The little prayer cards that you usually get at the funeral home. There's nothing wrong with them, but they're a little generic. And I have a friend who's a writer, and she came up with this idea. She goes, well, instead of prayer cards, I want to have bookmarks. I'm like, that's great. And then I thought, bookmarks, that is such an easy thing to do yourself. And yeah, you can order bookmarks on Etsy. You can buy them at Barnes and Noble. Like, it's very easy to just go get a bunch of bookmarks. But what's meaningful is when you say, let's make these bookmarks. And then you decide, well, what are we going to put them on? Do we want a quote of our friend? Do we want maybe use pictures of her favorite books? Authors? Like, you get to decide a picture of her on the bookmark. You get to decide what goes on it. And then you just put it out to your circle of friends. Okay, who knows how to lay something out on their computer? Like I do, my sister, she does things in Publisher. She knows how to do that. Okay, great. Who can print these out? Who can cut them up? Who's crafty in the family and can like punch a hole in them and run some ribbon through it? Anybody here to have a laminator? Oh yeah, I got a laminator. So then you've spent like a couple hours, you've come together and you have handmade these bookmarks, and they are way better than something you bought. And it was a shared experience. And that, that's not an example of raising money, starting a foundation, but it's an example of bringing people together and doing something, an activity that is bonding and people feel really good about. Like, yeah, I did this thing and it was good.
I went to a memorial service for a woman who was known for her lemon meringue pies. So the daughters had gotten together and baked like 6 of these pies for a good sized crowd. I would say there was like maybe 50 people there, but there was plenty of pie to go around and it was delicious. And they gave out the recipe cards.
Well, I love that. And that is like totally one of my favorite easy things to do, because okay, I'm going to say something totally obvious. So many people love food. Like, all right, who doesn't love food? But there's people who are like bakers or cooks who are really massively into food. Like you said, they've got their favorite lemon meringue pie or whatever it is. This is such an easy thing to do. Spend a day in the kitchen making those pies, or have a pie contest, like that would be fun. Like, okay, you don't necessarily have to recreate, but we're going to have a pie contest. And then you have, and then you make a prize. So it's like, there's actually a fun party aspect of it. Or you say, we're going to make 20 pies and or 50 pies, whatever. And we're going to say, drop them off at all the senior centers in our town, or drop them off at churches or any place where people are gathering. We're going to deliver pies today to people, or take orders for pies in somebody's honor and then donate that money to some cause that meant something to the person. I'm trying to like brainstorm on the spot here. What else could you do with pies? I mean, I love the recipe thing. Okay, and here's a bit of a shout out to a company whose name I don't know, but I love this idea. So if you like this idea, go Google it. There's probably a couple of companies, and they take written things, like a recipe was the one I saw, and they imprint it onto a plate.
Ooh.
Or a towel. So I think that's such a cool thing for somebody who's got a recipe, especially when it's like, if it's in somebody's handwriting, it's so personal. Like maybe you've been looking at that index card with that recipe on it, your entire life, and it really means something to you. You can have that imprinted onto a permanent surface, which is really kind of fun. And, you can even, I mean, I don't know what the cost of those is, but if this was a big enough thing, make 20 of those plates and then give them out as souvenirs. I kept using that word when my dad died. I kept saying to my mom, I want a souvenir of him.
A party favor.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're just keepsakes. I mean, they're just things that remind you of somebody. But they can be special, and there's so many things out there.
Well, let's keep going through your PDF.
Yes. Okay. So I think that's it for the objection or the objective. The next thing you want to do, and this is obviously the key to the whole thing, is that it has to be personal. The whole thing has to be coming from the person's personality. Like the thing that we did for my dad, not that it was like the greatest idea ever, but it was only because of something, a phrase that he used. So this is where I can't particularly like lead anybody anywhere. Like it's up to each individual to know what this is, but you just want to think about that person, like think about their traits, their characteristics, their passions, their hobbies. When you think of them, what do you think about? Like, what comes to mind? Did they have a favorite saying, something that they always did? What do you think of? And like, just make a list of like 20 things. When you think of that person, what do you think of? And that's just like where you start brainstorming, like what in your list like lights you up? What makes you smile and think, oh, I'm really gonna miss this? Like that smile sad, like I am so going to miss this because I loved this about that person. Bingo, maybe that's your thing. Do something on that thing. It does not have to be glamorous. It doesn't have to be admirable. It can be totally quirky, weird. It can be, I mean, maybe it's just not even a great trait of theirs, but you can make a spin on that because it's what you think of. I always think of this. I'm not sure this is the perfect place for this example, but someone I know who was talking about her funeral plans, she said, and she's young, like she, has no plans to die anytime soon, but she said, I have already told my family, she's Polish. She said, they have to have a kielbasa truck at my funeral. I think this is great. Oh. And undoubtedly her whole family knows she loves kielbasa and it's something that they sort of already do, but maybe they wouldn't have thought like that they need a kielbasa truck at her goodbye party. But that's a starting point. So maybe if you were going to build on that, you'd be like, well, as long as we're having a kielbasa truck, maybe we should have polka music too. Maybe we should just go and have a big Polish day, or have other trucks there, or have somebody come dressed up and like everybody bring your Polish doll in a costume or something. Like just build up on that idea. But for her, that was the thing, the kielbasa truck. There was also a story that I read in the newspaper a few years ago, and this was another sad story about a young person who died in New Jersey. I think he died in a hiking accident, and he was a senior in high school, and obviously this was, sudden. And the dad was saying that he went to the funeral home to, because this is what you do, like you go through the motions, like, well, I have to go to the funeral home. He goes to the funeral home and he said that he was sitting there talking to the funeral director and he was in a fog and like nothing that anybody was saying was making him feel better or feel good. And he said, I didn't know what to do, but all of a sudden I just said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but it's not this. And he just got up and left. And he went home and he thought about it and just opened his mind and he thought about his son. And the thing about his son was he had started an ultimate Frisbee club in their high school and it had become a really big thing. And that's what he was like famous for. Everybody knew that. So he said, we're not having a traditional funeral. We're having an ultimate Frisbee contest. Like we're going to pick a Saturday and it's going to be a town-wide celebration of his life, ultimate Frisbee tournament. Cool. And I was so touched by that story, mostly because I thought I could just think about this man sitting there and he doesn't know what he's going to do. He just knows this doesn't feel right. So I feel like we should all have that, sort of that freedom and compassion for ourselves, that we don't always have to know right away what we're going to do or what the plan is, but trust your instincts. And if something doesn't feel right about the ceremony, the ritual, what other people are expecting, you don't have to just go along and say, well, I have to do this. This is what's expected. You don't. You can take a step back and and see what does feel right for you. And it'll come to you. It will come to you. So, you know, the whole thing is that it's personal, that it's about that person. And okay, so the next thing is to decide on a scope. And this can be small or big. Bigger is not necessarily better. It does not have to be huge. Like I said, we don't have to be starting foundations here. Just think about how much you want your activity, your whatever it is you're doing, how big you want that circle to be. You know, maybe you have a small family, whatever the circumstances are, for whatever reason you think, no, I just want to keep this really amongst ourselves. Or obviously you just keep going out and out and out. How big do we want to make this? The whole extended family. And you think, well, you know, family and friends. And you're like, well, our own neighborhood. Are you in a group, or was the person who died, were they in a group that was really important, that you want to include, that organization, that club? Did they have a charity that meant something to them, that you want to sort of include that organization into your plan? You just want to settle on how the size of it, so that it's contained, you know what you're dealing with. And just like a little example of this, and I had no intention of sharing this, but I think it makes sense. In part of my plans, I have a favorite charity called the Hunger Project. It works in Africa and Asia. And you can't really help them. You can give them money. But what I want my people to do when I die is to come into where I'm living and have a silent auction with all my crap, like literally act like it's a silent auction, and then donate all that money to the charity, to the Hunger Project, which is my charity. Like, that's my way of supporting a cause. And what I feel like in my head would be really fun, like going around my house buying my crap for a good cause.
A great idea. Good way to downsize. But do you have somebody you put in charge to do that?
Well, yes. I mean, somebody has to be in charge of your funeral, your goodbye, which
carrying out your wishes.
Yes, yes. And I feel like that is part of when I talk to people about planning, you know, your own goodbye in advance. One of the main things is you pick a person. You ask them, make sure that they're going to do this for you and that they've agreed to do what you want. And then what you want to do is roll up your sleeves. Like, literally, I love this. Like, roll up your sleeves, do it yourself as much as possible. Like, whatever it is, if you've decided to have like an event that's going to be in a park, or you're going to have raise money for something that's maybe not a one-time thing, whatever it is, like, you've got this project, and just start planning it. And how can we get everybody who's in our circle to help, to participate? And it doesn't, you can open it up to anybody. It's like, the choice is yours. I'm just saying, the more people who are in the inner circle, who are involved, the better it is for them, because it's that bonding experience. But it kind of could be anybody. But my whole point is, don't just go buy and order a bunch of stuff. Do as much of it yourself as you can. Okay, so my analogy for this is sort of like with Aaron Collins and the pizza thing. They could have ordered a pizza and had it delivered. They could have just sent a waitress $500 in cash, you know, but they didn't. They did it all in person. They went, they ate the pizza, they gave her $500 in cash that she could feel. They didn't necessarily have to videotape it, but they did. Like, they really got involved, and then they shared it. So that's a part of what makes this bigger. And like I said, it doesn't have to be gigantic, but from whatever level you are, as much as you can include people to make it a little bit bigger, a little bit better, there's that much more reward in it.
Like
And I was thinking a little caveat about this, because we still go to funeral directors, whether you're having something there on their premises or not, because a lot of what I'm talking about here doesn't mean that you're still not necessarily going to a funeral home and doing all that, but you're doing this in addition to it. But this is like your own project, and you won't necessarily ever find a funeral director who's going to support you or help you with this, because it's just not part of their thing. So I'm just throwing that out there, is that these are personal projects of our own, and not something that a funeral director would necessarily be jumping on board with you.
Idea of a home funeral, where that is literally rolling up your sleeves and getting involved. And that doesn't happen very often in this day and age, where you say somebody dies at home on hospice, and you keep the body at home and you surround it with dry ice to keep it cool and refrigerated. And the family does the washing and the dressing and the casketing and the combing of the hair, maybe, put a little makeup on them. And so many people find that so satisfying to provide these services to their loved one. I'm not sure what the rules are in Pennsylvania, but in New Mexico and in many states, in fact, I think there are only about 8 states that require the involvement of a funeral home, but you can do it yourself. You can file the paperwork and get the burial transit permit, and you got to wrangle with the doctor's office to get the death certificate signed. I mean, there's a reason funeral homes get paid what they get paid, because there's a lot of paperwork involved. They will transport the body for you. So if you're going to take your loved one to the crematory or to the green burial ground, you need to have a big enough car. I have a Subaru Outback that I can actually put a casket in. But not everybody's got their own hearse. The pickup trucks work, but sedans, no, not usually. So but that's a really concrete way of getting involved and processing your grief with action.
Yes, I love home funerals, and I normally always talk about them. I was trying to just focus tonight, but I'm so glad that you brought that up. And that, yeah, I mean, that is like going the whole 9 yards for it. And yeah, I mean, I'm you've read so many of these stories, and nobody has ever said it wasn't one of the best things they ever did in their life. It is unbelievable. So yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
What else you got?
What else have I got? Okay, I'm just gonna say this before I forget, because this is also one of my favorite things, like decorating your own casket. Like this kind of goes hand in hand a lot with having a home funeral, because then it's like it's all just part of it. You're at home. It makes sense to decorate the casket while you're already home. But even if you're not having a home funeral, you can still decorate the casket.
Especially because when so many people get cremated, for economy's sake, they're usually choosing a cardboard box, basically, which is very easy to decorate.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's such a hands-on, talking about a bonding experience of something you'll never forget. Like, yeah, we spent the afternoon decorating grandma's coffin. And then what goes hand in hand in this is, because I always tell people you need a playlist, which is kind of this is like the one thing that is becoming a little bit normal, people getting a playlist, like where you would spend the day having the playlist, decorating the coffin, making pies, like talking about the person and bonding. It's just, yeah. Okay. So next on my list of things to keep in mind is that perfection is not required. Like, if this sounds like, oh my God, this sounds like so much work, and like this is why we have funeral directors, so I don't have to do all this stuff. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be great. Just do what you can, will be satisfying. Anything you do is better than just leaving it to funeral directors and not getting involved. And then the last thing that's really important is that it doesn't have to be done immediately, because let's face it, when somebody has died is the worst moment in a lot of people's lives. This is generally not the time that we're all going to be like, oh, I'm going to be so creative today. Like, no, this is the worst day of your life. You're lucky if you can think straight, which is one of the reasons why this is so important to write down your own ideas. But if you're doing this for somebody else and it was sudden, you have had no time to talk about this, you want to do something creative, an event, you want to take it up a notch, but for whatever reason, you can't deal with it right now, it's fine. You can do it any time. You can do whatever you need to do right now and still have the celebration later. You can do it on an anniversary of their death. You could do it on their birthday date, on any date that you make up that meant something to that person or to you. If they loved summer, just pick a day in summer. Like, just think of some date or occasion that is meaningful and just designate that that's when you're going to do it. And just make sure that even though you're putting it off, or just because you're putting it off doesn't mean you're going to forget about it. Like, make sure you go back and do it, because the juice is still there to do it, but it doesn't have to be done right away. And you know what? You can keep on doing these things. Like, we did this thing for my dad, not to keep harping on that, but we still didn't have the big party I want to have for him. So someday the guy's getting a big full-blown party. Why not? Like, I never stop missing him. I will never not want to have a party for my dad. So these are not even one-shot deals. You can keep on doing these things. So what you just want to create an unforgettable experience, whatever it is. And I think, like, just think about funerals and how this is so sad, but how often you try to remember somebody's funeral from a few years ago or something, and you're like, I can't remember anything about it. And that seems like sort of disgraceful. Like, really? Like, what happened to the standing ovation? You know, like, no, they didn't get a standing ovation. They got something completely 100% forgettable. I don't remember anything about it. That's what you don't want to do. You want to create something that nobody ever forgets, and that you love telling people, this is what we did. It doesn't have to be enormous. It just has to be meaningful, and that you like sharing that story and it makes you feel good. Yeah.
We got a comment. Is it Felicia? It looks like Felicia, but it looks like an I in there instead of an L.
Felicia, I know Felicia.
You do.
I do. She's great.
Well, she put it in a comment that she knows a woodworker who is setting up classes to help people turn their own urns. So make their own urns.
That is great. You know what? That's actually, I'm so glad you said that, because I've had this burning desire to have a casket making class, but here people can't store caskets here. Like, nobody's got enough room to store a casket. Although, you know, they do that in New Zealand, right? You've heard of the Kiwi Coffin Club?
Yeah.
Okay, so for anybody else on this call who's never heard, go to YouTube and Google Kiwi Coffin Club, or not Google, and YouTube, and you'll see they made a little video. It's all these senior citizens, like, these people are in their 80s and 90s, and they meet like once a week, and they make their own caskets, like, from wood. They build them, and then they decorate them, and they're laughing, they're playing music, they're having a great time. It is so great.
And then they turn it into furniture until it's needed.
Yes, yes. And you know what? Make your own urn is great, because you don't need a lot of room for an urn.
Yep. Just
Great.
think coffee can size.
Yeah.
About
Yeah.
5 pounds of cremated remains. Yes.
All right. So this is my show and tell. Can you see this?
Oh,
This is, I bought this online. It's the Rest in Peace coffee grounds urn.
oh my God.
Ingredients, the dearly departed. This thing costs like a dollar, $2.49 or something. And I think it's hysterical. Like I would much rather have this than a $100 marble urn, but that's just me. But the point is anything that is meaningful, like especially for urns, like, oh my gosh, like just get a container in your house. Like you can use anything. Just find something that means something to you. Not that there's anything wrong with beautiful urns. There's nothing wrong with them, but it just can be very meaningful to you, something that you already have. So I see we only got like 10 minutes. So
Yeah.
I just have a few things to end up with, but I can say them at the very end. What I want to do right now is ask anybody, like, has anybody gotten any ideas now that you're thinking of something for yourself that you would want to have at your goodbye?
I love that coffee can. That
It's
is
great. I know.
great.
This was something that happened. It was a 5-year-old girl who had died, and she had been sick her whole life. So her family was prepared. They knew that was going to happen. And she apparently was a very lively, active, sweet little girl who always wanted to paint her toenails, paint her fingernails, make cupcakes. She was a real girly girl, just like party spirit. And so when she died and she was 5 and her parents said, there is no way we can have like a traditional, like solemn funeral. It's not who she was. It's not what we want to do. It's not the memory we want of this. So they decided that they were going to have like a little girl tea party.
Aww.
And they invited everybody. I think they had it in like a cafeteria at a school gymnasium. And they put all these balloons out and they decorated it like a tea party. And they had like little teacups and tea parties for everybody. They had a cupcake decorating station, like decorate your own cupcakes because she loved cupcakes. They had a paint your nails station that the kids could do that. They brought in all of her stuffed animals for the kids to take one home with them. Like they just made it a little girl party. And again, they didn't raise money or anything, but what a wonderful experience for everybody. There's a woman I know who had attended one of my events, Liz Hamilton Ferrand, who started an organization, a funeral organization. She's a funeral director. And she wants, for her goodbye, she wants it to be a Halloween party. So that's kind of appropriate for right now because she's one of those people who's crazy about Halloween. All of her friends and family know that about her, so they will not think it's weird. She wants like costumes, the whole bit. Like that's what she wants for her goodbye, a Halloween party. So nothing's off the table. This is a bingo card. Like this is so funny. This woman was a bingo player. And so her son made this, and they put the numbers across the top were her birthday, and the numbers across the bottom were her day of death. And on the back, it says, as I lay me down to slumber, all I need is one more number. When to the big game I go, I pray the Lord, I yell bingo. And this is what they gave out. Like instead of prayer cards, they had these things made up. Like,
Great.
how fun is that?
Yeah.
Oh, somebody wrote something.
Oh, Althea wrote, the best memorial ever was for a guy that had won 5 Emmy Awards and his program was a playbill like you get at the theater. Fabulous memorial too, entertainment, jokes, and his memorabilia, including the 5 Emmys.
That is great. That's great. And that reminds me of another one that's on my list that I was like glossing over. I'd read a story about a theater teacher at I think it was a community theater. And he had been like the theater manager for many years. Everybody knew him. They put on so many productions. So they had their celebration of life at the auditorium, and it was sort of like a show, but then a select group of people decided to do what do you call it? A flash mob? Isn't that what those things are called?
They show
They were
up.
so popular like years ago.
Yeah.
Like people just showed up and did this flash mob at his life celebration because he loved them. And I thought that was very fun. So
Well,
this is what you want to remember. I'm just going to like sum this stuff up is don't just be a passive observer. Be an engaged creator of something. There's healing through action. The more you participate in anything, in life, everything, the more you participate, the more you get out of it. And you're going all out. You're going all out because it's your emotion. Like that's the thing about funerals now that I feel like where we're like going wrong is that we're going like we're watching these other people carry out this ceremony, like we're just going through these motions and we're forgetting, why are we doing this? Or what's the point? What's going on here? What's going on here is basically that we're saying goodbye to this person that we've loved. It could be our favorite person in the world. We're saying goodbye. Like, put your heart into that. Think of it as like, this is your way of thanking this person for being in your life and making the difference in your life that they had. Like, use that. Like, you're not going like taking it up a notch just because it's a better idea. Like, you're doing it because that is actually where your emotion is. You are saying goodbye to somebody. Say it with all your heart. I'm on in the Funeral Consumers Alliance, which I volunteer with. They say a lot of times that people go into to plan these funerals and they'll say to the funeral director, they have all these decisions that they have to make. And they're like overwhelmed, like choose this, choose that, like all these decisions. And it's so easy to get overwhelmed. And then often people will just say, well, what does everybody else get? Like, well, what do most people get? I just think like, talk about like the wrong time to be thinking, what does everybody else do? Like, this is supposed to be personal. Like, oh, let me just do what everybody else has done. Like, no, this is not the time to do what everybody else has done. This isn't easy necessarily because people kind of like just following and going along and doing the traditions. And there's nothing wrong with the traditions, but you have to be a little brave to do this because you might get flack from people. So I'm just throwing that out there that your average person doesn't think like that, but don't let that stop you. Like, let the vision of how good this can be motivate you, and know that you're a trendsetter and that you're helping to inspire other people, because our views about death and funerals and saying goodbye are never going to change if people don't start doing other things. And this is how it works. They see other people doing cool things, and then now they have permission to go do something cool and different because they saw how neat it was. Like, that's it. Like, just think, you want to create a standing ovation for this person.
And just like the photo I put up, the parrot head salute with the Jimmy Buffett fan funeral. Well, great ideas, Kyle. Thank you so much for speaking with us and your advice and that great handout. I think a lot of us will be inspired to go out and have a fun funeral.
Well, yes, I hope so. Thank you. This was great.
Thank you all. So take a little bio break. We've got a half an hour until our next session, which is the women who know what the dead want to tell you. We're going to talk about communicating with the dead. So see you in about 30 minutes.